The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. From hot dogs to cool kitties, this is Darkside of the Pooch.
Woo! Ho, 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 ho! Give me out there, Dr. Rab. Go, baby, go!
Can't leave that.
What in the world? Welcome to the award-winning Dark Side of the Pooch. It's all about pet care. It's about good things for your pets. And, of course, we got Dr. Rab Stewart from the Rossbridge Animal Hospital co-hosting the show with me. He's the man, the myth, the legend. He's got everything they need. He got all the answers for you when it comes to caring for your pets here from the Rossbridge Animal Hospital. Their number is 205-208-0301, 208-0301 at Rossbridge Vet. I hope you've had a wonderful holiday season. I hope everything's been good. 2021 was good to you. This is the first show of 2022. All good in your world?
Everything is great. It's been a crazy year, a busy year. The pet population and pet ownership has gone through the roof. You know, the last year and a half or so. It's slowed down a little bit, but the veterinary industry is it's very busy. But I think, like everything else, some things are hard to come by. You know, so we press on nonetheless.
There you go. Give me a prediction for 2022. Give me your best Nostradamus moment, if you can, for how you believe your business will change in 2022, if you can, or a trend that you see in pet ownership.
I think that it'll level off. I think the growth that we saw for the last year and a half as an industry will slow down a little bit. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
But you know, when you have a lot of puppies and a lot of kittens, those grow into adults and they don't come in quite as often. So I think there's going to be some slowdown.
And normally when you see an influx, and I'm assuming you see this more after holidays because people are given pets and they perhaps didn't want a pet, then you see the pet population in humane societies and dog pounds go up a little bit. Am I right or wrong there? And if you see the ownership of a lot more animals coming in, what do you see down the road? Do you see people giving those pets up, or do you think just more people love having animals now?
No, I don't think they'll give them up. But you know, usually we don't see, at least people don't say that they got a pet that they didn't want.
Yeah.
But this year it was kind of interesting. We had someone that whose daughter is 18, and her boyfriend gave her a dog, and she still lives at home. And these people are great. They already have several pets, and they're great pet owners. But the girl's mom was less than thrilled that now she has another animal that she is basically taking care of because her daughter's boyfriend got them a new dog.
Yeah, I went on a date with a woman, a first date, and it was on Easter weekend. This is about 27, 28 years ago. And for some reason, I gave her a baby chick for Easter. And she thought it was,
I like that.
She thought it was the most heartwarming, coolest gift she'd ever got. But it was also like, okay, are we buying furniture tomorrow? And I was like, no. And I just thought it was a really cool idea. And she's like, what am I supposed to do with it? And I said, leave it on the cage and take care of it. And, you know, needless to say, that was our first and only date. Thanks. And I didn't get any of that night either. Cats in car engines. We'll talk about that. Reprogramming your pooches. We got some Mutt Mail, lots of Mutt Mail to get into, but I want to start with emotional support animals. A man in New York has a potbelly pig that he considers an emotional support animal, yet the city he lives in does not allow farm animals inside the city limits. He's going to court for the 13th time in January to keep his potbelly pig as an emotional support animal. First of all, I want you to explain to people what exactly is an emotional support animal and what do you have to do in order to maintain its support. In other words, you can't just have an animal and say it's mine. We all have emotional support from all of our dogs and animals. We know when we get home from work, it's an emotional support animal. But when you're talking about a licensed support animal, what does that mean?
Well, usually they have to go through some kind of certification. You know, like you see pets more and more, especially in airports, and they've got these service dog vests on. And service dogs, you know, they help people with medical conditions, whether it's an emotional condition or less of an emotional, but more of, like, for example, like seizures. You can train a dog to know if a seizure's coming.
Yeah.
Or there are some dogs that are trained to know if people's blood sugar's getting too low or too high, which is just, incredible. So they do have to go through a certain level of training. And when you have an emotional support dog, it's a little bit different than having a dog that's trained to know if you have a blood sugar issue or a seizure issue or something like that.
How do they know?
Yeah, I don't know. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how you can. I don't know if it has to come from the person's psychiatrist or psychologist. Maybe Josh would know on that. I'm not really sure, but we, at least just me in my day to day, you see it a lot more. But I've also heard of people who don't go through the proper channels, and you can get these vests online, and they just want their pet to be with them all the time.
Yeah.
They don't really have anything prescribed by a doctor. And they just get these vests online, and it just allows them to really go wherever they want to go. I guess the people that, if we're talking airlines or whatever, they just don't ask a lot of questions.
Yeah. So a potbelly pig, I'm assuming that any animal could be considered an emotional support animal if it emotionally supports you. What do you think about animals outside dogs or maybe even cats as an emotional support animal? And are there better ones than others?
No, I think it's great. If you truly need an emotional support animal, I don't think it. There are some exceptions for sure, but pigs, they're easily domesticated,
yeah,
and they're really intelligent. So, I think that would, for me, I'm just telling you what I would prefer. I think that would be fine. There was a story. Everything. I lose track of time, but I feel like this has been within the last year, maybe year and a half, where somebody put a miniature pony on a plane. That really happened.
Yeah. I remember seeing that story. Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember what happened, but I can't remember if the thing was on the plane. Like, they let it on. I don't know if they took off with it on there, like in the cabin, but I know it was on the plane.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's like you said, there's just a really wide range. And I'm an animal guy.
Yeah.
I'm cool with being on a plane with a donkey or a mule or whatever, a miniature horse. Let's have a good time.
No, I think that.
So,
yeah.
Everybody's not like me, though, because horses take dumps.
At 35,000 feet, there's nowhere to go. Rossbridge Animal Hospital's Dr. Rab Stewart joins us here every single week for Darkside the Pooch, every Monday at noon and 8. You can reach out to him, 205-208-0301. Also, go to TonyCurryRadio.net. Tony Curry Radio, that's Curry with a K, TonyCurryRadio.net, and leave your email questions. We get tons of emails. We'll do Mutt Mail here in just a few seconds, and we'll do an entire show on that today here on Darkside of the Pooch. Also, a heartwarming story about a little girl, 9-year-old girl who was born with cleft palate, who adopted a cat that also had cleft palate in Philadelphia. I was not aware that animals could have cleft palate. Could you please expound on that?
Yeah, they can, and it's not very common. I've never seen a case of it. Something that's more common in puppies is they just kind of their jaws are malformed, and so their teeth can kind of contact their upper palate, their hard palate, and that can cause some indentions. Older pets, they can get these little, and this is similar to a cleft palate, but older pets, dogs and cats don't brush their teeth, and so they get really bad dental disease, and they can lose their canine teeth. And in small breed dogs that have big teeth, like Dachshunds, they're the kind of poster child for when they need to have a canine tooth removed, or let's say it falls out on its own, it leaves a hole that connects the mouth to the nose, and that's called an oronasal fistula. And a lot of times that's what a cleft palate is. It's that separation that exists between the nasal cavity and the oral cavity is connected with a hole. So I have never seen a congenital meaning, cleft palate from birth.
Yeah.
In a pet.
That's interesting. And I would assume then it would make it more difficult for that animal to eat as well, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's not, they'll still eat, but the danger is if they get any food in the nasal passage, and because that can lead to the lungs, so they can aspirate food or water, and that can be a really big deal, because if you get water or you get food that gets down in your lungs, number one, in the immediate time frame, if it can get lodged and you may not breathe well,
Mm-hmm.
then they can get pneumonia. So get a bacterial infection from whatever gets down in there.
Yeah.
So it can become a big deal.
Robert in Butte, Montana, our Mutt Mail here, said when he wrote this email, it was about 3 degrees below zero. He said, inevitably, every time he goes out to start his car, his cat is inside the hood, usually sitting on top of the engine to stay warm. He said he's seen cats on top of his tires because obviously tires warm up. And he's afraid he's going to end up killing his cat one of these times because the cat's not going to get out in time. How relevant or prevalent is that in cold weather states? We don't have that too much down here in the South. And how can you protect your little kitty cats from not getting torn up inside car engines and tires?
Yeah, I've seen it. It doesn't, like you said, it doesn't get incredibly cold down here, but people come in all the time and say, "Hey, I found a cat. I heard it, in my engine compartment or whatever. Stop the car immediately." And it's possible that they're not going to get hurt, as long as they don't get in the belt or the fan and all that stuff. So it does happen down here. It's definitely not happening today with it as warm, as it's been the past few days here. But the best way to do it, and I know this is kind of a cop-out, but the best way to do it is just to keep them, inside during cold weather, because you can't really box up your car. But they will find a warm place, and it happens as far south as here. I'm from North Alabama, and it would happen pretty routinely up there. We had barn cats, and they would try to find a warm place. Fortunately, we never had any of them that died from being in there or even really got hurt. But yeah, we'd see it in the morning. You walk out to the truck and one will come running out from underneath to you. You see it kind of bound down. So yeah, we see it, but really the only way to do it is keep them away from the truck.
If you can cook a steak on an engine block, you can cook a cat, right?
Yeah, it doesn't taste as
it's not as well. Tom from Paducah wrote a really funny email, and I'll paraphrase it here. But he said, "What in the hell's going on with pet food?" He said, "I've been giving my dogs Alpo for years. They seem to be happy. Sometimes I wet it down. I give them scraps at the table. When we have a nice meal, I give them good food. They're fit." He said, "Now he saw this commercial, Just Food for Dogs." He said, "Why is everyone making me feel so bad about not giving my dog the right type of food? If we're eating the right type of food, carrots, peas, meat, real byproduct stuff, why are we supposed to feed our pets the same thing?" He said, "Does it really make a difference?"
It does make a difference. The first thing is some dogs, and this is not his dog, but some dogs have sensitive stomachs, and if you feed them human food or table scraps, it may not agree with them. But if it does, then there's nothing wrong with giving a dog table food as long as it's not a known toxicity. Like we've talked about before, grapes and raisins and onions and chocolate and, garlic, all that stuff. You want to avoid that across the board. Yeah. But, other things may not necessarily be bad as long as the dog doesn't have a problem with it. One thing that dogs are prone to is pancreatitis. And sometimes dogs get pancreatitis and we're not really sure what caused it. But fatty meals has been implicated from time to time. So if you're giving them red meat that's got a lot of fat in it, or something else with a lot of fat, it can cause pancreatitis. But the other thing that if you were just to feed a dog or a cat just table food forever, mm-hmm. it could be fine. It could be fine. But there are some things that we put in pet food specifically for dogs and cats. And one of the main things I'm talking about is taurine, and that you're not going to find taurine at an acceptable level in human food. What does taurine do? Well, Taurine, it's something that we put into dog and cat food that can have effects on their heart and also their metabolism. So dogs and cats that are deficient in taurine can have metabolic issues. They can also have heart issues. So, who's to say if they will have a problem? It's more likely that they'll have a problem. They need this taurine, and you're not going to find it in high enough quantities in human food. But if they're getting supplemented with dog food, which it sounds like this dog is, then it's probably not that big of a deal. But if you're going to feed just a straight table scrap diet, eventually they're probably going to have some problems.
Well, and for the most part, I would assume that we think that animals or dogs mainly can process anything because they eat their own poop and they're eating bark and they eat grass. They eat things that obviously human beings wouldn't. And for the most part, I always think to myself, whenever you're cutting fat off a steak, I give it to the dog. For the most part, you should never give a dog what you wouldn't eat, correct?
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to, they're not that much different than us.
Yeah.
So if you're not going to eat it, I wouldn't feed it to my pet.
Yeah, I understand. And back in our day, back in a generation, if you were giving your dog, say Alpo or dry food, you were normal. And then if you gave your animal wet food, you were a highfalutin. And then if, of course, you were giving them food off the dinner table, you didn't live in my neighborhood. you were too good for me. So you can give your dogs whatever you want. And I'm assuming this may be one of those trends for 2022 or more, because now there's a refrigerator in the pet food aisle where you're like, hey, listen, if it's good enough for you, it's good enough for Fifi, right? And so now people are deciding, hey, perhaps I should be feeding my dog better food.
Yeah, and the dog food industry is just it's kind of mad. It's madness, really. I've fed my dog a certain type of food for its whole life. I don't really give it any treats. I don't vary the food at all. And he has no problems. He doesn't have any GI issues. He doesn't have any skin issues. Some days I can tell that he wants something different because we've got 3 kids running around and they're bound to drop food, and he'll hold out. Or if we leave something on the counter, that's what he wants. But so there are some days where he may not eat his breakfast, but I really stick by his diet. And I feel like that's really important. There's a lot of different dog food companies out there, and some are reputable and others aren't. And there are some that you would think would be really great because of the marketing dollars that they've spent. And in reality, they're just not.
Can you give us a few of those, or are you not allowed to do that?
Well, I mean, I would just say that if you're looking for a dog food, you want to be sure that it's been evaluated by AAFCO,
okay.
AAFCO, and that if it has, then it's probably a good food. If it doesn't have that label that it's been evaluated and it's passed for growing animals or adult animals or whatever age class that your pet falls in, then you don't want to feed that food.
Yeah.
So, look for something that has that label on it. And if it has, you at least know that it's been evaluated and it meets the standards that it says it's going to meet.
One of the many doctors we have here on Tony Kurre Radio, Dr. Rab Stewart of the Rossbridge Animal Hospital. His number is 205-208-0301 at Rossbridge Vet. This is Darkside of the Pooch, a name he came up with himself a couple of years ago. You can hear the show every Monday. It's Darkside of the Pooch, Mondays at noon and 8. Here's a Mutt Mail question. This is probably something we could do an entire show on, and reprogramming our dogs and cats. Ellen in Atlanta said it's been very difficult over the holidays. We had to move a couple of chairs around. We moved the recliner to this side so we could put the Christmas tree here. We had a nativity scene, so we moved the couch over here. And the animals were kind of disrupted by the routine because they didn't know where to sleep, where to eat. And now people get new furniture. They got new things in their house. Perhaps you want to move things around. You're changing their feeding spots. They're changing their litter box locations, and maybe even adding some furniture or taking some furniture out of a particular room. How does that affect an animal?
Most of them, it's not going to affect them at all, really. You can add things here or there, or take things away, or move things around. And if you don't have, an anxious pet, they're probably not going to know or not going to care. One thing that's really interesting is pets are very adaptable. So one thing that if you have an older pet, if you move a lot of stuff around in your house or you put in things that are new, it's really a great way to figure out if your geriatric pet is blind or not,
Hmm.
because they can adapt and they'll know a house so well. And if you put something where it's not supposed to be, they'll run into it. And then you'll say, well, this happened overnight. I mean, well, I don't understand. Everything was fine. Well, it didn't happen overnight. It happened very gradually, and you didn't move anything around in the house until now. And so it seems like it's something that just happened. So I can't tell you how many times I've had somebody come in and say, my cat went blind overnight. My dog
Wow.
went blind overnight. Did you bring anything in the house, or did you go when you did you go stay at someone else's house? Oh yeah. Well, that's probably it. Now there are some things that can cause acute blindness if their blood pressure gets too high. Dogs can get this thing that's basically just sudden acute retinal detachment, and that can happen overnight. So I mean, there are things that can cause it. That's just kind of part of the history that we take. When we're somebody comes in and says something like this. So that's one thing that can be affected. But if you have especially a cat, or if you have an anxious dog, and you move stuff around the house, if they're anxious, then potentially it could cause them to be anxious. But cats, if you move their litter box, that's a no. Don't mess with the box unless we tell you to mess with the box.
Yeah. And why is that?
Because
They'll poop in your shoes.
they get very accustomed to going in a certain spot.
Yeah.
And if you move the litter box and then they start having problems going in the litter box, it's probably because the box got moved and they don't want to go where that box is.
Yeah.
It doesn't have anything to do with the box itself. It's just that it's not in its normal spot, and the cat doesn't want to go wherever it was moved.
It takes the average human being about 90 days to start or end a brand new habit. What's it take for, just say, a dog, for sake of this particular debate here? When you're teaching an animal a new trick, whether it's sit, whether it's go outside, whether it is, how much time do you spend on that animal every day in order for it to maintain that new habit?
I think it depends on what it is.
Yeah.
If you're doing something as simple as trying to train a dog to eat in a certain area of your house, or to go to the bathroom outside, stuff that they're going to do anyway, because they're going to eat and they're going to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
I mean, that may only take a few days, but if you're talking, you want to teach your dog a trick, I mean, that could take weeks,
Yeah.
or longer. If you're trying to break a habit, sometimes it's not even, number one, it's not even possible to break a habit in a pet. But other times, I mean, that can take, days and days of working with them for hours a day until you've conditioned them to change the behavior that you're trying to change. So it varies.
And to your point, we have a Havanese that I think is about 4 or 5 years old, and it really hasn't properly been trained how to pee outside. Whenever we say you want to go outside, it usually runs to its cage, and then we're like, okay, I'm not getting up from my chair, so the dog doesn't want to go outside. It's raining or it's snowing or whatever it is. And it took me about 2 weeks to finally get that animal. I had to spend every single time it ate or it slept. I know when it got up, it had to go outside, even when it doesn't have to go potty. And now it runs the door, and I have not had a mistake in like the last month and a half, so it's been great. Dr. Rab Stewart here from the Rossbridge Animal Hospital joins us every single week for Darkside the Pooch at noon and 8. It's Darkside the Pooch Mondays here exclusively on Tony Curre Radio, at Rossbridge Vet on Twitter, and also 205-208-0301. Tracy in Bowling Green, this is Mutt Mail. Send your Mutt Mail to TonyCurryRadio.net. That's TonyCurryRadio.net. Become a bonehead, and we'll read your emails here on Darkside the Pooch. Tracy from Bowling Green, they just went through all those horrific storms about a month and a half ago. She said that a tornado ripped through their house. They lost their dog and their cat, found both alive under the rubble 9 days later. She said they looked everywhere but where they thought the dog and the cat would find solitude, if you will, and try to save itself. If in fact you can't find your cat or dog, is there a place you should look?
What a great story.
Isn't it great?
Wow.
Yeah, after
That's
9 days.
awesome. And I'm so glad that family's okay. What a terrible tragedy that was. So the first thing that you should do is get them microchipped. And I know we've talked about that before. And I used to work with a guy, and when I started there, he said, when you're talking to people about microchips, the first thing you need to tell them is the best thing about microchips is when we have a natural disaster, microchips can come in very handy, because if a tornado comes, or depending on where you live, if a hurricane comes, that's a way that they can get reunited. So having a microchip put in your pet when it's a puppy or a kitten is really the best thing that you can do.
Would you suggest a microchip? Explain to people, because a microchip basically is an identifier that animal is yours. So if someone turns it into a pound and you go there and they have the microchip, you can get it, correct? It's not a GPS system.
No, you can't track them. It's a little identification tool that goes right underneath the skin, and it's about the size of a grain of rice. And we put it in with a needle. It's a little bit larger gauge needle than what we would give a vaccine with, but it's a needle, and it takes a special little microchip reader, which looks like a really big old cell phone, and you push a button on that. And so I'm holding that instrument, or somebody in my office or at a humane society or another practice, they're holding this little device. They push the button. The microchip is implanted between the shoulder blades in dogs and cats. So we take this little device, push the button, we wave it over the area, and then it reads the number that's on the microchip. That's all it is. It's a little piece of plastic with a little bit of metal in there. And all it is it has a number. And so you scan and you see the number. And then we call the company who made the chip, and we tell them, I've got a pet here, and this is the microchip number. And then they look in their database and they say, okay, that pet belongs to this person. Mm-hmm. We are going to call them. And so the company calls them and tells the owner, your pet is here. Can you go get it? And then that's how we get them reunited.
Is there a GPS tracking system where you can actually see where your animal is?
Yeah, but they're all external. They're like on collars and stuff. They're not, to my knowledge, there's nothing that we implant that will do that for you. But there are collars that have GPS trackers on them. But the problem with collars is they can come off.
Yeah. And most dogs that want to get away, for some reason, they'll rub up against a tree and they'll figure out a way to get that collar off. I've always wanted to put a GoPro on my on my 2-year-old blue heeler, because I know that dog. I would love to know where that dog goes and how it gets back home, because I know it goes miles away from the house.
Hey, maybe you're onto something. Maybe you can get a grant.
Listen, I mean, I think it would just be fun to watch and see what that animal does. Just to see where he goes. I think it'd be amazing. Dr. Rab Stewart, go ahead.
I'd be in on that. Let's start a study.
All right. Listen, I'm all about. Hey, listen, this industry is like tripled just in the last 5 years, and certainly COVID, the pandemic, is added to that. And I know that you are just busting at the seams. You're so busy because there's so many people out there with pets now, which I think is a beautiful thing. I think it's a great thing from an emotional standpoint. And just have some pets in the house, I think, is a beautiful thing. So we'll look into that. Dr. Rab Stewart, Rossbridge Animal Hospital. Tell people how they can find you and another fantastic Darkside the Pooch. Go.
Yeah, you can find us. We're on Facebook, Rossbridge Animal Hospital. You can reach us by phone at 208-0301, 205-208-0301. Or you can email us, rossbridgeanimalhospital@gmail.com.
Till next week, my friend. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate it. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too, man. Thank you, brother. I appreciate you.